Share. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started, and then maybe we'll have some more friends join us. But my name is Katie Rich, and I'm a relatively new member of the church. We joined last year. My family and I moved here from Raleigh. My husband Matt works remotely, so we got to move a little closer to home. And my daughter is 4.5. So her name's Everett. She has a little bit glasses. Yeah, we're trying to get her immersed in the church, and we love everything about her as a bar. But I'm here today in my capacity also as a school counselor. So I have going on 15 years of experience as a high school counselor. I've been in Wake County for 13 years and then here in Butler County for 2, just about. So lots of experience with teenagers. 4.5-year-olds are very new to me, but teenagers I get. So if you have questions, if you want to discuss, I have been consider myself to be an expert on teenage mental health, but I have a lot of experience with it. As a school counselor, a lot of my role is being sort of that person that helps connect families with the professional resources, right? Because I can't do therapy sessions in my office for 200 students, right? So it's a little bit more of helping families navigate mental health challenges, helping students to make coping skills, and kind of moving forward in that sense, right? So as Christians, what are things that we can do to promote empathy and compassion? That's what I've been asked to speak about today. And I love this topic because I think it is something that I personally work on daily, and it's a challenge daily. So we're going to start off with just a little bit of an icebreaker thing. Before we got started. Oh, there we go. Okay. So over the last 2 weeks, because it's a little weird the last couple of weeks with Caroline and Maddie on the school. So you all have spoken a lot about what mental health is, what does it look like, what mental health challenge look like, and how can we strengthen support those who are struggling with this. But today we're going to kind of take a step back and say, what can we do about it, right? Because some of this might be a little bit redundant, because of course, anytime you're talking about mental health, you're talking about how you can be a support to those that you love, or those that you just run into on the street or in the grocery store, right? So we're talking today more about promoting acceptance and compassion to those who are struggling with mental illness. So we're going to start off with just a brief little icebreaker. So on your note card, well, just take a minute. And we're going to think about a personal challenge that you are going through, right? These are not going to be like read out loud, but what we're going to do is write them down. So don't put any identifiers on there, but if you are struggling with, maybe you have a parent or a spouse ill, or maybe you have a, I don't know, financial situation or something that you personally are working through right now. And then so everyone knows, and we're going to switch the note card around and just be able to take a little list of someone else might off what the note card and then distribute them. So there won't be any identifiers, but obviously you don't want to write something on your card. Okay, so just take just a minute for that. And as we finish that up, I have an image on the board, that I think is just really helpful, for us to sort of think of and remember as we talk about mental health. A lot of times, we think of those who are struggling with mental health, we think of the other, right? We think of the disease, we think of what's wrong. But then we can remember that each of us feel almost all of these emotions at any one time, right? Or throughout the day. And this is an emotion we all know it's really hard to see, but every single color, every single word is a different feeling that one can experience, right? And where you are at that precise moment is not who you are as a human being, right? That is where you are at that time. So as a mother, as a father, as a child, those are things that we can remember about ourselves, because having empathy for others first requires us to have empathy and compassion for ourselves, right? So I'm gonna grab these cards real quick. If you didn't want to write anything, totally fine. Right. That. And again, what we're doing with these, we're not reading them aloud. We're just gonna take a minute to look over it. If you don't get one to share with the person beside you. But just take a moment to read over it and know about the rest. But as you think about, as you read over this card, whether it has something deeply personal, whether it has something that, it's like, oh yeah, we're all dealing with that, right? The purpose of this is to remember that even just within this room, we are all so similar in so many ways, we're all members of this church, we're all, lovers of God. But at the same time, we're all dealing with different challenges that are not written across our forehead every day. Right? So as we approach others, both in and outside of our community, trying to remember that empathy, that, kind of digging deep and seeing that other people are experiencing things that we might not know about ourselves, right? So I've said empathy about 50 times. So I just want to talk about what it is for just a moment. So empathy is two things. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of someone else, along with the sympathetic consciousness of others' distress and a desire to relieve it, right? And there is a wonderful woman named Brene Brown, who I think can't explain something that's at her, okay? But Brene Brown has this wonderful, it's just about 2.5 minute short that I want to show you about empathy and what the difference is between empathy and sympathy. So, let's see if I can write this word.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection, sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you're enjoying it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space where someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then you look and you say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, huh? No, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can do it. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school, at least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you took me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay, so that, the phrase at the end, rarely. Alright, so, rarely can a response make something better. So it is not our jobs to fix people. That was something that I struggled with in graduate school, something I struggled with in my day-to-day job. But it is not our job to fix other people. It is our job to be with them and show them that we care and show them that they are loved and they're not. Right? Because I don't know everyone as well as I would like to in this room, but I don't think we have a ton of psychotherapists in this room. You do. Or, oh, I know, there we go. We got one. But we don't necessarily need to take on that job when you're at the grocery store. Yeah, I've been writing for about 3 years, so. Absolutely, and so we need to remember that our job as Christians is to be with other people in their suffering, in their happiness, in their sadness. We need to be with them. So we're gonna talk about a few evidences of empathy in scripture. All right, so the first is from Philippians, and then I'm gonna ask for some additional help reading. If then there's any comfort in Christ, any consolation in love, any partnership in the Spirit, any tender affection and sympathy, make my joy complete. Be of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or empty conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he existed in the form of God, did not regard the quality of God as something to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, assuming human likeness, and being found in appearance as human. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. All right, so the next verse that I'd love for someone to read, don't mind not here, it's long, it's from Ephesians chapter 4.
Ephesians 4:1-6. I therefore, the prisoner in the Lord, beg you to walk with a manner worthy of the calling to which you were called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, in every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit with the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you are called to the one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, and Father of all, who is above all, through all.
Yeah. Would anyone be want to read? Thank you.
Okay, Job 2:8-13. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all these troubles that had come upon him, each of them set out from his home. Eliphaz, the Temanite, Bildad, the Shuhite, and Zophar, the Naamathite, they met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great.
So thank you, extra point for all of it.
I'm the visitor here, so.
But they sat with him without speaking. I think it's all the suffering is great. Like, how difficult is that for us, right? You wanna make people feel better, we want to be that picture, that's all lying around the silver cloud, right? When in fact, what God wants us to do is sit with them and be with them in their suffering, right? It doesn't mean you can't offer words of comfort, right? But trying to think, at least you have a marriage, at least your other child coming home to school, right? Last one, shortest one yet in Thessalonians.
For God has destined us not for wrath, but for obtaining salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live with you. Therefore, encourage one another and build up each other as indeed you are doing.
So we've talked a lot in generalities right now about how to help others, right? How to show empathy toward others. But when we're speaking specifically about those struggling with mental health, this could be those struggling with anxiety or depression, someone that you encounter in your daily life who's struggling with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, manic depression, those things. What can we do day to day that will ensure that we are supporting those around us, right? So regardless of if it is just a person in your home that you're trying to support or someone that you just encountered here at church or anywhere out, these are 5 things that you can do to sort of focus in on that person first approach. So first of all, of course, developing a safe and trusting environment, making sure that people know that you are someone that they can talk to, right? That comes with time, that comes with trust. But making sure that they know that if they come and give you a shared confidence with you, that you're not going to turn around and go tell everyone else, but you know, group chat, that you're not going to do those things to break that trust with them. Then they are more likely to engage that feeling of recovery with you. So it might take some time, right? It might take weeks of checking in with that person. Hey, how are you? Hey, I was just praying about you. I was just thinking about you. Those steps that you can take to build that relationship. Secondly, committing to active listening. I see lots of wonderful active listeners in here. Philippa, amazing active listener. You see her, she's looking at you, she's nodding, right? Those are things that I learned in school, but those are things that we can all practice as just good human beings, show that they're listening. One challenge I know that I have personally is preparing my response as I'm listening to someone else, right? What am I going to be able to say back to what they're saying to me? Right? Instead, I challenge you to prepare yourself to repeat back or paraphrase what they had just told you, right? You don't have to do that, but I'm saying preparing yourself instead. It's sort of like when you read a textbook in college, reading over it, and you're trying to make sure, did I digest that or am I just skimming the page, right? Am I digesting what you're actually telling me about your life, about what you're experiencing, or am I already thinking about how things, right? Or how disturbing this conversation is, or how off the rocker you are, right? So, the next thing I really want to talk about is dis-ease versus the disease, right? So we need to remember that, yes, someone may struggle with mental health challenges. There are a lot of people in this room who are struggling with mental health challenges. But is that the essence of their being? No, right? They're a human being, and you are their friend or their, community member. And so as you think about this, think about what it is about the disease that is causing them discomfort, right? And how can you be there for them in that discomfort, right? So when we focus on that compassionate caring, people can understand that we are invested in them and really want them to feel comfort from us, not what we think of them, right? So then we have the avoiding getting stuck on perfection. None of us will be perfect in this room, right? We will say things, we will try to fix things, we will roll our eyes at a comment that someone makes, especially if they're a teenager, right? We will, but continuing to come back to the table and not think of the relationship as broken because maybe you slipped up, because maybe you weren't as compassionate yesterday as you should have been with that coworker, that person. Continuing to show up and knowing that none of us will be perfect. And then finally, knowing your life's purpose, which is like this huge expectation of all of us, right? But as children of God, our job is to be there for one another. That's our job. So if you keep showing up every day, that is your purpose. Now, if you are someone's therapist, you might have a different purpose in that role, right? But your job as a friend, coworker, a parent, a child, your job is to continue showing up every day and showing that Christian love and compassion for them, right? So when we talk about the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is something that I think will be familiar to many of you, depending on your levels of experience with working with people with mental illness. I want to talk a little bit about language, because language can actually be incredibly important, and it can draw serious dividers without needing to do so, right? So we're going to talk about a few terms that you may hear, and then some things you can try instead. So instead of calling someone a psycho or a schizo, that's okay.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Absolutely.
Knowing your life's purpose.
Yes.
You try to find that out with counseling your high school students, is that correct?
Trying to find out
Do you
their,
discover or ask them to discover their
it is something that we work on.
consciously? So my question is, are the purposes that they're seeking, are they getting better over time? Or detrimental, more detrimental, are we making progress? Not.
Right, so I am taking this more of as I am interacting with those in the community versus when I am interacting with a student in my office, right? And those of y'all that joined late, I'm a student counselor, so I am not a licensed therapist, but I work with the general population of students, right? So no, I would not say that I am going into the deeper intensive therapeutic relationship with the student, but I think that it helps when you are feeling like you are in the depths, right? Whether or not you are struggling with a diagnosed mental illness or not, it helps to think about what is my purpose, what can I strive to?
I'm looking for encouragement.
Uh-huh.
So I'm thinking in 3 years, have you observed better, more positive purposes or declining, or other students declining?
That's hard to say. I will say that our students are more in tune with their adult emotions than they were even 5 years ago. And that is because of the entire community and our society's take on mental health, right? And because there is a more accepting view of those struggling with mental illness than there used to be, then it's easier to say, I'm depressed, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling sad, right? So I think you're on the way there. Do I think that it's all sunshine and rainbows? No, that's not where we are, but I do think the fact that students are talking about it, that's one step toward getting help, right? And as a listener, which all of you all are, as a listener to those people, we can at least help connect them with professionals when they are ready. We're gonna talk about that here. That's a great question. So when we say to avoid using psycho and schizo, that's disease first terminology, right? So that's labeling a person based on something they're struggling with. That's like saying she's a diabetic, okay? But she's also a human being, right? She also is a wonderful mom and she's, you know, a boss at work and all these great things, right? So we try to say a person who struggles with X, Y, Z, right? Obviously, some of these you don't hear day to day anymore, but a person experiencing a mental health problem is helping you to identify that they are much more of a person besides their disease. Instead of labeling people in general as mentally ill, people experiencing mental health problems, when you're talking about those who are in a psychiatric hospital, and those are becoming actually fewer and fewer patients or clients because they are receiving medical treatment, right? Instead of being released from a hospital, we use the term discharged. Half the bills, where you use this terminology, antidepressant medication of prescription drugs. And then, unfortunately, suicide is something that we talk about a lot in the schools because it is something that teenagers, you know, are starting to think about it too, but it's something that we are really trying to change the terminology around and to say die by suicide or took your life instead of successfully committed suicide, right? It's just a different way of looking at that. So as we are thinking about seeking help, right, and we're on to sort of this next tack, someone has come to you and they have said, you know, I'm struggling with this, I'm really feeling like I'm in the depth of despair, can't see my way out, right, I'm in that hole. When we talk about it, start that conversation, and then talk about what sort of help they are willing to receive, right? You cannot force someone into a therapeutic relationship, okay? So I cannot I could forcibly take a child to therapy, sit her down in front of the therapist, right? But until that person is ready and willing to accept help, we cannot force that upon them, okay? So reminding them constantly that you are there for them whenever they are ready. So as they think through that, would you like me to take you to your appointment? Would you like me to sit in the waiting room for your appointment? Would you like me to sit in the appointment? If they feel comfortable with that and their therapist is okay with it, why not, right? And then of course, if someone is at a risk to themselves or someone else, you have no choice. So as a school counselor, this is something that I explain to my students, that they have confidentiality with me. Everything you say to me stays between us, no matter what, except if you are a danger to yourself or to someone else, right? Because if there is a risk of danger, I would rather break our relationship than see them hurt, right? And as a parent, as a grandparent, as a sibling, as a mentor, as a coworker, I firmly believe that that should be everyone's stand on it, right? Like our relationship means more to me than anything except for life, right? So if you know that someone has the capacity or the intent to hurt themselves, then that is when we say pump the brakes, I exist, right? Until then, you can be nice if you want about it, nice and patient, right? So I do want to talk about just a few different resources that we have in here in Greensboro. I saw them up on the board as well outside of the room service this morning. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline has round the clock support. So if you have sort of one of these arms length relationships with someone that you don't feel comfortable enough to be that person for them, you could at least give them the resource, right? Or maybe you just don't feel like they're at a point yet that you can talk about mental illness without feeling kind of like, I'm uncomfortable, I don't know what I'm talking about, right? So you'll see these magnets everywhere, they have a Spanish line, but it is wonderful, a wonderful resource for someone to just pick up the phone or text and just get someone to start that conversation, right? There's also the Hope Line, which is based just in North Carolina. It's another 24/7 band crisis line. Medical referrals. So if you have someone that is in your care that you are trying to help receive treatment. So this could be maybe your teenager, right? Or this could be a parent, of course. Pediatrician and your primary care provider provide referrals to a therapist, right? That's a lot of times the easiest way to go. There's also, you can just call your private insurance or go online and Blue Cross Blue Shield, whoever you have, and find a provider that's covered in your network. One of my favorite resources for students is just Psychology Today, right? Because you can go on there and you can see a picture of the provider, you can see the types of care that they provide. So maybe they specialize in adolescents, maybe they specialize in, those struggling with Alzheimer's, or they struggle, those who are caring for their parents, that kind of thing. So the different ways that you can get to them, and then you just give a call, hey, you take this insurance, right? A little more complicated if you're working with someone who is working with Medicaid, but there is a Medicaid number on the back for behavioral health that they can get you directly to a provider, right? Because it is much more cost effective for insurance companies to treat you or the client with outpatient therapy than to wait for it to get to a point where they are going into an office, right? So a wonderful resource that you may or may not know about here in Greensboro, it's relatively new, it's about 2 years old, it's called VHeart. Think of VHeart as 911 for mental health. It is amazing. I think I've had not, we had it like computer bed or So, as I work in school, unfortunately, we do have crises that arise, and sometimes we do have, times when a student needs immediate medical care, typically they are suicidal, having those thoughts and will not go away, and they have access to be able to hurt themselves, right? So, BHART basically works with the parent or works with the person to say maybe transport your child, and they will take them directly to a mental health facility. So, it is a great resource that we have, because calling 911 on a 14-year-old is incredibly traumatizing, right? To have them transported and out. So it's a way to have someone who is trained, a professional who can, be with them in their time of need and make it as calm of a transition into that professional care responsibility.
Transported about this,
Yes.
because that's.
They use hospitals. Right, so, so basically, in a public school, I can speak to my experience, in public school, what we would do is we would tell a parent, hey, like, your child needs to get medical care, like, they need to go to the behavioral health center, which is, so, if the parents, if I'm working in Reedsville today, can't get there until, I could get off, cannot be there for whatever reason. You can take them, right? Well, we as school employees are legally not allowed to, nor is it advised if someone is in a public crisis, right? So then you could call BHART and say, you have the parents' permission, they would also BHART connect with them, and they come in an unmarked car. There is a police officer with them, and that is more of a safety thing, right? So there's at least 2 mental health technicians, and then 1 officer. But they pull up to the front of the school, the student walks out with 2 people who are just dressed normally, and police officers probably be kind, so it's the least traumatizing experience for a child, right? But if you are thinking, if you're in the workplace, you're anywhere, you need someone to help you get that person there because you don't feel like you can safely put them into your car, then BHART is a great resource. First responder. And then finally, behavioral health provides timely access to mental health services without having to go to the emergency room, right? Because we all have seen the emergency room shows on TV, and maybe some of y'all even have worked in emergency rooms, like that is not the type of therapeutic care that is going to help anyone who is struggling with thoughts of suicide or depression, right? So, sometimes behavioral health is exactly the place they need to go. Is it all sunshine and rainbows? Absolutely not, right? But the student is going to, or the person is going to go into the behavioral health facility, they do an intake, just like they would in a regular ER. Usually the parent or guardian, whenever they can get there, will also answer some questions, will get insurance information. And then the patient will go back into a room with the doctor and actually speak with them about what's going on. And they will assess the level of care if needed. And so sometimes it's, hey, I really think that your child could benefit from weekly or twice a week counseling, outpatient counseling, right? I'm gonna recommend these providers, or here's a list of providers that we could give you, and go from there. Sometimes it's not that simple, and they decide your child or your partner, your whoever is at risk to themselves, and we think that they need to stay. And so typically, a stay at behavioral health will be no more than 2 weeks at the maximum that they can be in a facility here in Greensboro. There are additional mental health facilities across the state that students can be transferred, people can be transported to, if they need it. But a lot of times, what we found is that the psychiatric hospital model is kind of falling by the wayside because people's needs are so different and, can be treated in such a variety.
So you obviously work in this hospital students, other than feeling like there's a rest of themselves or somebody else. When else would you have an emergency? What type of behavior would you have an emergency to need to call the agency?
So psychosis tends to, if someone is going to experience psychosis, it would typically happen for the end of 13 years, sometimes a little earlier for males versus females, and then into the early 20s. And so, I have had times when, there was such a manic episode, keep in mind, I work in a lot of different schools, and, every person goes to high school, you've heard of that, right? So when you are working with someone and you're so like frightened by their behavior, so out of the ordinary, that would be when I would call, of course, I always start with the parent, right? Where parents first, you are the first one, and then you never call the parent, they won't transport any minor without the express consent of the parent. Now, with an adult, the B part does have to have their express consent as well, and then if you do not have the express consent of the client, then, or the patient, then, an involuntary commitment. That's, involves a lot more like, people. But, I would say by and large, the parent is the one that's coming to the school, we're talking about it, and by the time they get across, and chances are they see behavior as well, if you see someone else to validate, this is learning, something going on, I'm watching the trial. Right? So I think that either it's great for that, be hard to way here. Yes.
I'd like to just give an, I guess a point as missionary, and, I was a math teacher.
Oh.
So I feel like I didn't pick the wrong Sunday school, but, I do, and for us to think about the preventative care of, preventing homelessness. And as much as possible, we can focus, well, like all students or all the persons involved on keeping hope alive. That was just the most important thing to say. Because homelessness is one of the 7 deadly sins. It's called sloth. And most people think that sloth is laziness. But the homelessness has taken over to make the person think that doing anything is just not gonna help. And so when you see a person slowing down and going into the sleep mode and going into the, well, I'm not gonna do anything mode, that is a sign of, I'll just say the decrease needs an increase. And there's something that's gotta get them to move up again instead of just continue to go negative, because the sleeping leads to, well, I'm not doing anything anyway, so what good am I here? And the problem with that is that suicide is the last part of hopelessness, because they lose faith even in God, that God would save them or help them. And when we reintroduce that, remember, God can do anything. And you hope now in God, because hope maketh unashamed. And some people do things because they're ashamed. They're so ashamed that they don't say it. They're so ashamed that they won't express it, or they don't want people to know or so. But hope maketh unashamed is the scripture. And that means that you won't be ashamed of the situation you're in. It's natural, it's human, and sometimes people have this situation. And so when you get them to move back up again, that's adding the hope. And that's the preventative care of all of this. This is probably the last stages where they actually got to the hopelessness. And this is the treatment, but the preventative care is to keep reinforcing that God really is faithful and fair. And if you just trust God, you remember the scriptures. And if you're not in a setting that's a religious setting, and it's so sad that the world wants to set, the religion and the God part out of it. If you're not in that setting, hopelessness is the way to speak about faith. That is the faith that they need, a hope for something. What is a goal that you want to accomplish? Name something that you can do that you want to begin to invest in and be able to do this as your life gift or your life skill or so. Who are the people who you would want to connect with, to work with, and begin to move them towards something that makes them say, oh yeah, because that's what ends up happening. They forget. They forget God, they forget hope, they forget those things. And a lot of the time, it gets to this point, and we have to do the preventative care as well.
Thank you.
God bless
Yeah,
you.
thank you. So, and you bring up a great point, because we do need to remember that anyone can feel depressed, can feel anxious, can have these feelings day to day. And reminding them of things that can help, lift them up. Those are great strategies, right? And things that we can do for every person, child or not, right? What I do as a mental health professional myself, I would like to say that sometimes though, no amount of preaching to someone is going to change their diagnosis, right? And so we have to remember that we should and ought to wrap those we love with kindness and empathy and compassion. And sometimes that showing it is by accessing health professional.
Do you counselors ask people who their healers are and learn, get insights from the answers?
I would say that I do it every day, but I like that. That's great.
Oh, and that's such a great idea, because the hero kind of tells you where their mind is thinking. And if the hero is a dark hero, then that might be some of the problem, because, well,
Yeah, is there?
Is the simple treatment around medication?
It depends. A lot of that would be parent driven. If we're talking about a teenager, right? So what are you comfortable with as a parent? I would say that the majority of therapists and mental health providers are going to start with talk therapy, right? So there's solution areas, grief counseling, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, there's all kinds of strategies to use to help people develop skills, right? Just like we would develop any other kind of skill. If we're easily distracted, I keep the notes list to help keep me on track, right? I don't necessarily need ADHD medication because I'm distracted, right? And so you don't necessarily need antidepressants because I am stagnant, right? But if you cannot get out of that stagnant, if you cannot get out of that hole, then medication is an excellent option. Sometimes it's an option for a short period. I always tell parents and students that their bodies are changing so much, so rapidly that the medication that works for 6 months might suddenly have no effect on you the next month, right? So it's a constant evaluation of that.
I knew a situation where an individual was overly medicated.
Oh, yeah.
And I think some of them was different doctors were writing different prescriptions.
So we're looking for a quick fix.
Yeah.
Right, especially if it's our child or our parent or our spouse, we want them to be vulnerable, right? And we think, well, we'll just take a medicine. It's better, right? But it's not necessarily the way. And I am a firm believer in talk therapy, like just letting someone listen to you, right? And that could be a paid professional, that could be your spouse, that could be your parent, your child, someone that you feel like you can express yourself to and feel heard, right? Because the whole idea here, at least today, is about that empathy, about wrapping those we love in our arms and showing them that no matter what they're going through, we are here for them, right? And that's the key. And I think establishing those relationships with our teenagers is huge, right? And I think that you have to step out of the I'm gonna fix you mentality and change it into the I am you, right? I'm with you. Or I am with you.
Well, I think I went with my son, and the reality of the schedule was, and versus the therapist schedule, was terrible. I mean, it's so hard to get an appointment with her or anybody with her. It was just so hard just to make those two busy schedules match. And I will say, what worked the best for him in the long run was medication and all the possible, whether it be a teacher at school or, other people here at church, and people that, so it was, they were doing kind of a therapist job, these positive role models and recruiters and folks who still have hope, and, with a dash of medication, but, the therapist eventually just there was the therapy. And then he did take something in college. But I hated that he wasn't going for therapy, but this conversation had something to see, and he got that therapy. So,
Well, and now understands what therapy is, right? So as he moves into adulthood, right now, like when I work with teenagers, I know I can't fix them during high school, right? That's not gonna happen, but I can equip them with skills, with understanding that, hey, you know that as part of your public education tuition, you get free therapy sessions, none of that. It's part of therapy, I mean, it's part of your tuition, so have that, right? So just knowing that you're building those skills, like I'm feeling in a really dark place, and I felt like this for a few weeks. And it's starting to affect my weight, my social life, my, my group or whatever. I'm gonna go talk to someone, right? I'm gonna access treatment. Treatment doesn't have to be forever. And in fact, most therapists are trying to end the therapeutic relationship with the goal, and they're trying to hit a goal. And I think we put a good place. I think we're in a place where I want you to go and live your life, and do those things that fulfill you, whether it's maybe community service, involving yourself more in your church, involving getting that sense of purpose. That what is your life goal, right? Helping them to find that is going to help them find fulfillment, right? But we cannot put that into them, not medicate that into them, we cannot talk therapy that into them, right?
And then I'd like to also add that, I think there is something in the world that talks about this is the way, this is the way, this is the way. And when children are confused about ways, for example, you have a household that's maybe a Christian-based household, and then they go to school and they hear the pull and tug of peer pressure. That ends up being such an influencer for them. And so every time I started off teaching middle schoolers, and every time I see a middle schooler, you see the braces, you see the youthfulness still, and I tell them, I say, always remember that you are probably the best human being ever right now. If presidents could be middle schoolers, it's just they have the balance of the authority and knowing the law, knowing what's right from wrong. And then they also have this quick wit. And so they're getting the logic and those kinds of things. So they really are great thinkers. And so I said, just remember that there's almost nothing that can stop you except you. If you let peer pressure convince you that you're not good enough, that or smart enough, or you're supposed to be the bottom rung of this group or that sort of thing. I said that's when children start trying to change themselves, and they get into the depression because they're trying to fit in and they're trying to do these kinds of things. So a lot of the parental part, they don't even realize what the child is doing, why the child is thinking that way, and somebody is being an influencer for them. And I remember as a teacher, I kept saying, how is it that the high school students, they move from being these brilliant students straight into, I want to learn how to smoke like they do. I want to do these things that others do. And a lot of that, I'll say it is a preventative thing when we start teaching the right from wrong, especially in church, especially at home. But remember, we've got a lot of parents who are taking in foster children. You've got a lot of parents who have children that, and they really don't have the skills or the history with the child and the commitment in that history, meaning they know where they've come from, so they know, but if they don't have that commitment, they want to refer them only to, and it's not every parent in that way, but the only reason why I said it is because sometimes we have to teach the parents about teaching their children when to be who they are and not change for anyone. And when it comes to others who are authority figures, even trying to influence them, because you hear about the teachers trying to change their religion and their son.
Just because we have only about a couple minutes left, and people are sitting out here, thank you all so much for coming. I do want to mention that that is a battle that I think our society is. And our leaders, social media, right? As adults, we see it, right? It's when we think about a child's grade, and not yet fully formed, they're about preschool. So if
And
they
the
logic
logic doesn't
that,
come to 12,
well, and
11 and 12.
so there are things though that we can do as parents, right? Let them be parents, but to put blocks in place to keep that growth from happening, right? And so, that's something that parents can also see, you know, therapy for, right? And you can go see someone because their child is struggling, right? To learn some of those strategies. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Asking for that help. And I feel like I had the baby books and they told me everything I needed to do. And then we hit 3 and it's like, oh, tough one, right? So, I mean, teenagers and parents who are asking me, what should I do to help? And I'm like, well, I don't know your child like that. They're into what makes them tick, what's their motivator. So we help them find those things, right? So there is not a quick fix by being a good Christian parent, you are not going to avoid all issues, right? And
Yeah, well, I was just gonna add that like, with the, those of the, it just made me think, the avoiding terms, you know, there, I think as part of that. What our goal needs to be is changing your enthusiasm, having positive enthusiasm. How do you view, like, so that you never know which was it's like, I could be my grandmother, even the nursing home, but it's dementia so bad, it's saying things that want her. And, they were not, they, like, you know, they would say that. And it wasn't who she was, but for a child who's depressed, but we have to choose that, we're taking the box. And it's easy with the elderly and the children. But, yeah, we gotta work on it more with others, but it's, we can't take it personally, and there's, I was also gonna add, there's, a training by dealing with like anxiety and OCD, space. I talked with Ellie, they do a lot of anxiety work there. But you can listen to some of his podcasts that about how to, space behind and to, so you don't need to get something. So only therapists can go through the training, but these podcasts are wonderful.
yeah, well, we did. I think
That's for, yeah,
Yeah, I love that, because, you know, I think that if I had, and again, I'm not the expert on this, but if I had an appointment, I think part of the reason that students and kids have so much anxiety and don't have so much anxiety is the amount of information, right? And how quickly we can share information, how quickly we can receive information, and feedback and task lists, things we're expected to do, expected to be busy and all of that. So think about the ways that we feel as adults and how that must feel to a child or a teenager or a young adult who doesn't have the years of experience or the coping skills to manage it, right? And so by not taking it personally and saying, you're having a hard time, I'm gonna be with this, right? What are some things you can look to that would make you cope, that's giving you that sense of, you know, maybe the hope is medication, maybe the hope is coming to church and being involved with youth group, maybe the hope is just leaving hands dirty in the yard, just something that's gonna help them feel a sense of purpose, because I do agree that, you know, depression and being in your head, it's gonna just make you want to stay in it, right? And so you have that physical force to get out.
That's so good, yeah.
Yes.
Maybe they.
And they all know this, if y'all are making it to the 11 o'clock, okay, I thought y'all go ahead.
Well, I'll say this, the game of chess, I used to be a math teacher, the game of chess acts like mathematics. It produces the same kind of gifts and skills that, math. Like doing the problems and the perseverance, the patience and all of that, is developed with mathematics. Chess will do also, so putting children in a chess program, even adults in a chess program, I don't know if it's conditioning or, you know, helping the mind to use, gifts and talents that it hasn't used before. And it's challenging enough to, you know, continue on all throughout their life if they chose this. But the whole point is, it really keeps the mind busy, and so they're not thinking about the petty things. Now, I say petty, but in their mind, this is top. Because sometimes parents have some kind of things that they grew up with, and they still hold on to those, and that's their value that they're putting on the child, and the child is saying, you know, well, why does it matter what they think? And they're like, no, but you have to be there enough.
Well, and you have to be on that too with like what seems petty to us.
Yes.
The biggest thing in the world, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a teaching perspective. They just, that means to consider.
Right.
And how somebody
And
thinks.
it's impossible to say no to those things unless we have self-confidence, right? And who is balance and. What they're. And that would be good. Thank you so much for being here. Hearing about you,
I was found this class, I saw your program, there was a, and I was thinking, oh, yeah, Sunday school, that's Sunday school, so yeah, I forgot to go back. Oh, yeah, my first time, I said that yesterday, I was in the rain. I got off one of the trolleys right here, and they sent me to the United Methodist, that was all.
Oh.
And so I actually was right now, and I found that way, and I said, wait a minute, this is a huge church, maybe this is different from the other church.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I did.
I wanted to share real quick, if you do work with teenagers or you're trying to help, kind of, get that relationship going, you feel like you're in the wall constantly. I found this great resource, that is basically like being the thing, if you're not buying it. Right, now, but it's not necessarily, right, it's a good thing. These are things that you can say when you're not fine, things that you can say when you're not fine and you wanna have a conversation. And things you can say when you're not fine and you don't wanna have a conversation, right, but empowering and we can't force it on everyone, we can use it ourselves, right, and if we're really not to trust, we can say, I'd love to get your advice about empowering, right, or do you want, did you hear about it? This is really bad. So, there, oh, sure, I think it was a great resource, and I was gonna try to make this available somehow, I don't know, share the platform, or the thing with these girls. I think it's really great. Well, that's a student day, email me my workshops, I know it's about that.
No.
I just wanna say hi, I'm Maddie. Yeah. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.